A nameplate on a Wall Street skyscraper reads Thorn Dynamics. A beautiful pregnant woman smiles holding a set of keys. But in the world of the ultra-rich, loyalty is a currency easily spent. What happens when a self-made millionaire, a man who has everything, decides he wants more? When he takes his young, ambitious mistress to the one place he shouldn't, the brand new, multi-million-dollar penthouse his pregnant wife just bought as a surprise for their growing family. He thought it was their secret. He thought he was in control. What he didn't know was that in the silent, watchful eyes of state-of-the-art security cameras, every whisper, every touch, and every betrayal was being recorded. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a story of a woman scorned a meticulous plan for justice and the digital evidence that brought a titan to his knees. Eleanor Sterling Thorne believed she was living a modern fairy tale. At 32, she was the elegant, intelligent wife of Marcus Thorne, the charismatic 40-year-old founder and CEO of Thorn Dynamics, a fintech empire that had disrupted Wall Street. Their life was a curated gallery of success, a sprawling mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, a fleet of luxury cars, and a prominent place in New York's philanthropic circles. Marcus was the architect of their wealth, a man whose ambition was as vast as the city skyline viewed from his corner office. Eleanor, with her background in art history and a keen eye for design, was the architect of their life, transforming their houses into homes and his raw success into refined legacy. Now 6 months pregnant with their first child, a son, Eleanor was secretly orchestrating her masterpiece. For weeks, she had been working with a discreet real estate agent, Brenda Jenkins, to acquire a property she knew Marcus had once coveted, the pinnacle penthouse of the new Orion Tower on Park Avenue. It wasn't just another asset. It was a statement, a nest for their new family, a surprise that would anchor them in the heart of the city where they'd built their empire. Using a trust she had established years ago with inheritance from her grandparents, Eleanor had made the purchase herself. The $28 million price tag was staggering, but she knew it was more than an investment in property. It was an investment in their future. She had spent the last month overseeing a bespoke, private renovation, turning the stark, modern space into a warm, inviting sanctuary. She imagined Marcus's face when she finally gave him the key. She pictured them standing on the terrace, his arm around her, her hand on her swollen belly, looking out over the city that was theirs. "Eleanor, darling, I'm going to be late tonight." Marcus's voice, smooth as aged whiskey, came through the phone one Tuesday evening. "Board dinner. We're closing the Q3 projections. Don't wait up." "Okay, my love," Eleanor replied, her voice warm. She was at the penthouse, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Just be safe. I'll have some tea and wait." "You're an angel," he said, and the line went dead. A familiar pang of loneliness pricked her heart, but she quickly dismissed it. This was the price of his genius, the sacrifice required for the life they led. He worked tirelessly. She knew that. She ran a hand over a newly installed bookshelf, the wood still smelling of varnish and promise. She had chosen every finish, every fixture. The smart home system was top of the line, a Verisure Pro HD network, with motion sensors, door contacts, and high-definition cameras covering every main area: the living room, the kitchen, the entryway, the terrace. She'd justified the expense to the contractor as a necessity for protecting their future child. The system was linked directly to an app on her phone, a fortress of digital security she could control from anywhere. Later that night, curled up in their king-sized bed in Greenwich, she found herself unable to sleep. It was nearly 2 a.m. The board dinner should have ended hours ago. She scrolled through her phone, looking at photos from their last vacation in Portofino. A notification popped up from a society blog, a photo gallery from a charity gala held that evening. She tapped on it casually, and her heart stopped. There in the background of a photo of a prominent socialite was Marcus. He wasn't with his board members. He was standing close to a young woman, a striking brunette in a slinky emerald green dress. His head was tilted towards hers, a private smile on his face that Eleanor knew all too well. It was the smile he used when he was captivated, utterly charmed. Eleanor zoomed in. The woman was young, maybe mid-20s, and she was gazing up at Marcus with an expression of pure adoration. Eleanor's breath hitched. It could be innocent. A colleague, a client's daughter. But something in his posture, the proprietary way his hand rested on the small of her back, felt like a betrayal. She quickly searched for Thorn Dynamics on social media. A few clicks led her to the company's LinkedIn page, and then to a post about their new summer intern program. And there she was, Chloe Decker, an MBA student from Wharton, interning in the acquisitions department. The photo was a professional headshot, but the eyes were the same. Ambitious, adoring. Eleanor's mind raced, connecting disparate dots from the past few months, the late nights that were becoming more frequent, the sudden scent of a different perfume, a light floral one, not her own woody amber scent on his suit jacket one evening, which he'd explained away as hugging a client, the new secret password on his personal laptop. She felt a cold dread seep into her bones, a feeling so alien in her carefully constructed world of warmth and love. The penthouse, her grand surprise, suddenly felt less like a gift and more like a gilded monument to her own naivety. She closed her eyes, her hand instinctively cradling her stomach, protecting her son from a world that had suddenly, terrifyingly tilted on its axis. The fairy tale was starting to show its cracks, and through them, a much darker story was beginning to emerge. The discovery of Chloe Decker was a poison that seeped slowly into Eleanor's bloodstream. For the next 2 weeks, she lived in a state of high alert, a silent observer in her own home. She became a detective of nuance, an archaeologist of her husband's lies. She noticed how he angled his phone away from her when a text came through the vague answers about his lunch meetings, the way he'd started taking calls on the terrace, his back turned to the house. Every excuse, every platitude now sounded hollow. "It's just work stress, darling," he'd say, kissing her forehead. But his eyes didn't meet hers. They seemed to look straight through her, focused on a horizon she was no longer a part of. The pain of her suspicion was a physical ache, a constant companion to the kicks and flutters of her unborn child. But beneath the pain, a steely resolve was beginning to form. She was not the type of woman to weep and wither. She was a Sterling before she was a Thorn, and the Sterlings were survivors. Her grandmother, who had left her the trust, had been a formidable woman who always said, "Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, and darling, always know where the exits are." Eleanor decided she needed more than suspicion. She needed facts. She needed proof. One morning, after Marcus left for the city, she made a call. Not to her sister, not to a friend, but to a name she found through a discreet referral from her family's old estate lawyer. "Davies Investigations," a gruff professional voice answered. "How can I help you?" "My name is Eleanor Sterling," she said, her own voice sounding surprisingly steady. "I need to hire a private investigator." Mr. Davies was a man who seemed to have been carved from granite and cynicism. He was ex-NYPD with eyes that missed nothing. They met in a quiet, anonymous cafe in the West Village. Eleanor, dressed down in a simple cashmere sweater, and jeans, laid out her situation calmly and concisely, omitting no detail. She spoke of Marcus, of Chloe, of the late nights and the secrets. Davies listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he took a slow sip of his black coffee. "Mrs. Thorne," he began, his voice low. "In my line of work, 99% of the time, the gut feeling is right. The question isn't usually if, but how deep it goes. What do you want to achieve?" "I want the truth," Eleanor said, her jaw tight. "All of it. I need a timeline. I need to know where they go, what they do. I need irrefutable evidence. I need to know exactly what I am dealing with before I make a single move." "Understood," Davies said. "It'll be discreet. You'll have a full report with photographic and video evidence where possible. It's not cheap." "That is not a concern," Eleanor stated flatly. Davies got to work immediately. Within days, the first reports started coming in via a secure, encrypted email server. They were clinical detached and utterly devastating. Lunch meetings at posh, out-of-the-way restaurants in Soho that stretched for hours. Marcus's driver dropping Chloe off at her luxury apartment building in Chelsea, an apartment far beyond the means of a typical intern, long after midnight. Photos of them laughing their heads close together. A receipt from Cartier for a love bracelet billed to a corporate expense account. Each email was a fresh stab to Eleanor's heart. Yet with each piece of evidence, her grief began to calcify into something harder, colder. She was no longer just a wife. She was a strategist. Meanwhile, the penthouse renovations were complete. The contractors were gone, the dust had settled, and the space was perfect, gleaming and silent. It was her sanctuary, and she now realized her greatest strategic asset. The state-of-the-art Verisha security system she had installed was fully operational. From the app on her phone, she could view a live feed from any of the 5 cameras review recorded footage, stored securely in the cloud, and receive instant motion alerts. She hadn't told Marcus about the penthouse yet. Her original plan to surprise him felt like a bitter joke now. Instead, she was waiting. Davies had told her that Marcus and Chloe were getting bolder, more careless. It was only a matter of time before they made a mistake she could use. The moment came on a Friday afternoon. Marcus called her around 3 p.m. "Sweetheart, terrible news. The servers for the London office just crashed. It's a total meltdown. I've got to fly out there tonight on the company jet. A few of the top engineers and I are going to have to pull an all-nighter at the office to manage the crisis before we leave. I probably won't even be able to come home. I'll head straight to Teterboro from here. I'll call you when I land." His voice was a symphony of feigned stress and urgency. The old Eleanor would have cooed with sympathy and packed him a virtual bag full of support. The new Eleanor simply said, "Oh, Marcus, that sounds awful. Please be careful. I love you. I love you too, Angel. More than anything. He lied." After hanging up, she immediately sent a text to Davies. "He says he's flying to London tonight. Office crisis. Please confirm." Less than an hour later, Davies's reply came. "Subject is not at Thorne Dynamics HQ. His car just dropped him at the corner of 57th and Park. He entered the Veuve Clicquot salon a moment ago. He is not alone. The intern, Chloe Decker, met him inside. And Mrs. Thorne, his jet is grounded at Teterboro for scheduled maintenance. There is no flight to London." Eleanor stared at the message, her blood running cold. He wasn't just lying. He was constructing an elaborate fiction to spend the weekend with his mistress. The audacity of it was breathtaking. She sat in the quiet of her Greenwich home, the silence pressing in on her. Where would they go for their secret weekend? A hotel, the Plaza, the St. Regis. They were too public. He was too well known. They would need somewhere private, somewhere no one would see them. And then a horrifying thought, a cold, slithering premonition entered her mind. Her penthouse. The one place in New York that was luxurious, completely private, and utterly unknown to anyone but her, her agent and the contractors. But how would he even get in? She remembered with a jolt the spare keycard she had given to the head contractor, which he had returned to her last week. But there was another keycard, the master building access card she had given Marcus a month ago, telling him it was for a future investment property she was looking at. He had tucked it into his wallet with a dismissive wave. "Whatever you think is best, darling." He had probably forgotten all about it. Until now. Her fingers trembled as she opened the Verisure security app on her phone. All cameras were offline, showing a peaceful, empty home. She armed the system, ensuring motion notifications were active and set to the highest sensitivity. For hours she waited. She didn't eat. She didn't move. She just sat, staring at her phone, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. At 8:17 p.m., her phone buzzed violently, the screen flashing with a red banner. Alert motion detected in Penthouse living area. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She tapped the notification. The app loaded, and the live feed from the living room camera blinked into existence. Her creation, her dream, her sanctuary. And standing in the middle of it were her husband and his mistress. The image on her phone screen was crystal clear, the high-definition feed rendering the scene with a cruel, intimate precision. The living room of her penthouse, which she had designed as a haven of soft creams, rich woods, and gentle lighting, was now the stage for her life's most profound betrayal. Marcus stood with his arms outstretched, a look of smug pride on his face. "So what do you think?" he asked, his voice a faint but discernible murmur through the phone's speaker. "I told you I had a surprise for you." Chloe Decker pirouetted in the center of the room, her emerald dress a slash of vibrant color against the neutral palette. She looked up at the soaring ceilings, her mouth agape. "Marcus, my God, this place it's unbelievable. Is this yours?" Eleanor felt a wave of nausea. Let's just say it's a new acquisition," Marcus said, walking towards the custom-built bar Eleanor had spent weeks designing with a craftsman from Italy. He opened the Sub-Zero refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of champagne. Veuve Clicquot. Of course. A little private getaway for us. No one in the world knows about this place. Eleanor's hand, resting on her stomach, tightened into a fist. I know she thought the words a silent, venomous scream in her mind. "The woman carrying your son knows." Chloe ran her hand along the back of the velvet sofa Eleanor had chosen. "It's so sophisticated. Your wife has amazing taste." The comment was a deliberate, calculated barb, and it landed perfectly. Marcus laughed, a short, dismissive sound that cut Eleanor deeper than any shout could have. Eleanor. Oh, darling, no. This wasn't her. Her taste is more traditional. Stuffy, you know, old money Connecticut. No, this was all me. I wanted something sleek, modern. Something for our future. Our future. The words echoed in the silent Greenwich house. Eleanor felt the air leave her lungs as if she'd been physically struck. He wasn't just cheating on her. He was erasing her. He was stealing her dreams, her accomplishments, her very taste and identity, and handing them to this young, vacuous girl as a gift. Chloe glided over to him, wrapping her arms around his neck as he expertly popped the cork. The sound was a small explosion, a celebration of their deception. "To us, then," Chloe whispered, her lips close to his ear. "And to our future, in our beautiful new home." "To us," Marcus echoed, pouring the golden liquid into 2 flutes. They clinked their glasses together, the delicate sound, a death knell for Eleanor's marriage. She watched, mesmerized by the horror, as they drank the champagne. She watched as Marcus led Chloe to the floor-to-ceiling windows. He pointed out landmarks, claiming the view as his own conquest. He put his arm around Chloe's waist, pulling her close. His hand moved from her waist down her back, settling possessively on her hip. They kissed. It wasn't a furtive peck. It was a long, slow, passionate kiss, a kiss of ownership and shared secrets, silhouetted against the glittering lights of New York City. The city Eleanor loved. In the home she had built, with the man she had loved. Something inside Eleanor broke. But it wasn't a fragile, shattering break. It was a cold, clean snap, like a bone setting itself into a new, stronger position. The tears that had been threatening to fall evaporated, replaced by an icy calm. The grief, the shock, the pain, they were all still there, but they were now packed in ice, preserved and weaponized. She swiped the screen, her movements deft and mechanical. She navigated the app's menu, her mind working with a clarity she hadn't felt in weeks. She located the recording of the past 10 minutes. She checked the file size. She saw the cloud icon indicating it was already backed up to a secure off-site server. She initiated a second download, sending a copy of the high-resolution video file directly to her personal encrypted hard drive. Then she did it again, sending it to a newly created password-protected cloud account under a name Marcus would never guess her grandmother's maiden name. She saved everything: the entry, the conversation, the toast, the kiss, every single damning second. She switched the camera feed, tapping through the different views. Kitchen camera showed them leaving the empty glasses on the marble island she had hand-selected. Hallway camera captured them, walking his arm slung casually over her shoulder towards the master bedroom. The bedroom she had designed for her and her husband for their new baby. The camera in the bedroom itself she had thankfully decided against activating. Some things she did not need to see. The hallway view was enough. The closed door was a final, brutal confirmation. She leaned back on her sofa, her phone held loosely in her hand. The immediate raw emotion had subsided, leaving a vast, empty space in its wake. And into that space, a plan began to bloom. It was no longer a question of confronting him, of tearful accusations and hollow apologies. That was the old Eleanor's script. The new Eleanor, the one forged in the last 10 minutes of digital surveillance, was playing a different game entirely. This wasn't about saving her marriage. It was about avenging it. It was about protecting her son and securing their future from the man who was so carelessly trying to discard them. He thought he was a titan, a master of the universe. He thought he was untouchable. He had no idea he was just a pawn in a game. He didn't even know he was playing. The board was set, the pieces were in motion, and the digital witness had just given her checkmate. Her thumb hovered over her contact list. She scrolled past her sister, past her mother, past her friends. She stopped on a name that represented not comfort, but power. A name she had been given by the same lawyer who had recommended Mr. Davies for a situation if things get complicated. Isabella Rossi, the most feared divorce attorney in New York City. Eleanor pressed the call button. It was nearly 9 p.m. on a Friday night, but she had a feeling Ms. Rossi would answer. People like Isabella Rossi were always ready for a war. And Eleanor Sterling Thorne was finally ready to declare one. Rossi, a sharp, no-nonsense voice, answered on the second ring. Ms. Rossi. Eleanor said, her voice devoid of any tremor. My name is Eleanor Sterling Thorne. We have not met, but we have a mutual acquaintance. I find myself in need of your services, and I have evidence that I believe will make for a very, very short conversation with my husband. Isabella Rossi's office on the 50th floor of the Solo building had a panoramic view of Central Park, but the woman herself was far more intimidating than the view. Sharp, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, with dark hair pulled back in a severe chignon, Isabella exuded an aura of lethal competence. She didn't offer tea or condolences. She offered a legal pad and a pen. "Lay it all out for me, Mrs. Thorne," she said, her voice cutting through the silence of the room. "From the beginning? And please be specific. The devil and the settlement is in the details." For the next hour, Eleanor spoke. She recounted everything with the precision of a CEO delivering a quarterly report. She detailed the structure of her trust, the purchase of the penthouse, solely in her name, the installation of the security system. She detailed the hiring of Mr. Davies, presenting a folder with his printed reports, the dates, the times, the Cartier receipts. And then she took out her tablet. "This is from Friday night," she said, and pressed play. Isabella Rossi leaned forward, her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, fixed on the screen. She watched the entire 10-minute clip without a word. She saw Marcus Thorne's smug pronouncements, his dismissal of his wife's taste, his toast to a future with his mistress. She watched the kiss. When the video ended, she leaned back in her chair, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. It was the smile of a shark that had just scented blood in the water. "My God," Isabella breathed, a rare note of admiration in her voice. "Eleanor, may I call you Eleanor? Most women come to me with tear-stained selfies and angry text messages. You come to me with a notarized confession filmed in 4K. Buying that penthouse in your name, under your own trust before this happened, installing that camera system. That wasn't just smart, that was genius." "He underestimated me," Eleanor said simply. "They always do," Isabella replied, her eyes gleaming. "Marcus Thorne is a public figure. His company, Thorne Dynamics, is his entire identity. Its stock is built on an image of stability foresight and ruthless intelligence. This footage, this doesn't just make him a cheater, it makes him a fool, a reckless, arrogant fool who celebrates with champagne in a trap he didn't even see." Isabella stood up and began to pace, her energy filling the room. "We are not going to file for a simple divorce. That's for civilians. This is a corporate dissolution. We are going to dismantle him. Quietly at first, then all at once." The plan they formulated over the next 2 hours was a masterpiece of legal and psychological warfare. Phase 1. The deep dive. Isabella would bring in a team of forensic accountants, the best in the business. "Davies found the Cartier receipt on a corporate card," she explained. "That's the tip of the iceberg. Men like Marcus, when they get careless in their personal lives, get careless in their professional lives. I guarantee you he's been funding this entire affair with company money. The apartment in Chelsea, the dinners, the gifts. It's not just infidelity, it's embezzlement, it's fraud. That's our leverage. It gives us power not just over his personal assets, but over his position at Thorne Dynamics." Phase 2. The silent siege. Eleanor would continue to play the part of the devoted, slightly oblivious pregnant wife. Marcus had returned from his London trip on Sunday evening, feigning exhaustion and spinning tales of server rooms and transatlantic stress. Eleanor had welcomed him home, made him soup, and listened with a serene smile, all the while knowing he was lying through his teeth. She had to maintain this facade. They needed him to remain comfortable and confident, with no idea that an army was massing at his gates. "Can you do it?" Isabella asked, her gaze intense. "Can you live the lie for a little while longer? Can you look him in the eye and not let him see the abyss?" Eleanor thought of her son. She thought of Marcus laughing as he erased her from her own life. "Yes," she said, her voice like ice. "I can." Phase 3. The reveal. This would not be a private confrontation. There will be no tearful showdown in the living room, Isabella declared. That gives him the chance to control the narrative, to beg, to manipulate. No. We choose the time and we choose the place. It must be public. It must be devastating. It must strip him of his power in the very arena where he derives his strength. They settled on the perfect venue, the upcoming Thorn Dynamics Annual Innovation Gala, a massive press and investor event scheduled in 3 weeks. It was Marcus's signature event where he would unveil the company's new AI-driven trading platform. The press, the board of directors, key investors, everyone who mattered in his world would be there. While Isabella's team of financial bloodhounds went to work, Eleanor focused on her role. She played the part of a lifetime. She discussed baby names with Marcus, feigned excitement over nursery furniture, and rubbed her belly with a gentle smile when he was in the room. Each day was a performance, and with each lie, he told her her resolve hardened. Davies continued his surveillance feeding information to Isabella's team. They discovered Chloe Decker's Chelsea apartment was being leased by a shell corporation funded directly from a Thorn Dynamics marketing slush fund. They found records of lavish trips to St. Bart's and Aspen, all coded as investor relations. The forensic accountants found more. Marcus had been using company funds as his personal piggy bank for years, but his spending had escalated dramatically in the last 6 months, coinciding perfectly with the start of his affair with Chloe. He had become sloppy, arrogant, and entitled. 2 days before the gala, Isabella called Eleanor for a final strategy meeting. The file on her desk was now 6 inches thick. "We have him, Eleanor," Isabella said, her voice humming with triumph. "We have him on breach of fiduciary duty wire, fraud and embezzlement. The infidelity is almost quaint by comparison. Tomorrow night, Marcus Thorn is going to give the speech of his life, and then we are going to give him ours." Eleanor walked out of Isabella's office and into the crisp autumn air. She felt a profound sense of calm. She was no longer a victim of her husband's betrayal. She was the architect of his reckoning. She hailed a cab, and instead of heading back to Greenwich, she gave a different address. "The Orion Tower on Park Avenue, please." She needed to see it one more time before the battle. She let herself into the penthouse. It was silent, pristine, and beautiful. It was no longer a dream home, nor was it a crime scene. It was a monument to her own strength. It was the place she had lost her fairy tale, but found herself. She walked out onto the terrace, the cool wind on her face, and looked out over the city. Tomorrow that city would learn who Marcus Thorn really was. And more importantly, it would learn who Eleanor Sterling was. The grand ballroom of the Cipriani on 42nd Street was a sea of power and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over hundreds of guests in black tie attire. Journalists lined the velvet ropes, their cameras flashing. Members of the Thorn Dynamics Board of Directors, titans of finance and industry, mingled with investors, their conversations a low hum of anticipation. This was Marcus Thorn's kingdom, and he was its undisputed king. He stood near the stage, a glass of champagne in hand, radiating confidence. He was at the top of his game. His company was about to launch a product that would redefine the market, and his beautiful pregnant wife was on his arm. Eleanor was a vision in a custom-made deep sapphire gown that draped elegantly over her 7-month pregnancy. Her hair was styled in soft waves, and her smile was serene. To any observer, they were the ultimate power couple. Marcus squeezed her hand. "You look breathtaking tonight, darling. Absolutely breathtaking. And you look like you're on top of the world, my love," she replied, her voice smooth and even. She met his eyes, and for a fraction of a second, she let him see a flicker of the ice behind her smile. He seemed momentarily puzzled, but then a colleague clapped him on the back and the moment passed. She scanned the room. She saw Chloe Decker standing near the back with other junior-level employees. Chloe was watching them, a possessive glint in her eye, a faint smirk on her lips. She believed she was the secret winner of a game Eleanor didn't even know she was playing. The irony was almost too delicious. The presentations began. After the CFO gave a glowing report, the COO stepped up to introduce the man of the hour. And now a man whose vision continues to propel us into the future, our founder and CEO, Marcus Thorne. Applause thundered through the ballroom as Marcus took the stage. He was a master showman, charismatic and compelling. He spoke of innovation, of disruption, of a future powered by Thorne dynamics. He was met with rapturous applause. "Thank you," he said, beaming. "This is a testament to our incredible team, our loyal investors, and of course my beautiful wife, Eleanor, my constant source of inspiration." He gestured to her, and a spotlight found her in the crowd. She smiled graciously, inclining her head as the room applauded her. As Marcus began to take questions from the press, Eleanor gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to a woman standing near the ballroom entrance. Isabella Rossi, looking like a high-fashion executioner in a black Chanel suit, strode into the room. She was flanked by two stern-looking men in dark suits. They didn't stop at the ropes. They walked directly purposefully towards the stage. The reporters, sensing a disruption, turned their cameras. The low hum of conversation in the room faltered. Marcus, mid-sentence, saw them approaching. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. "Excuse me," he said into the microphone. "Can I help you?" Isabella reached the foot of the stage and looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Marcus Thorne," she said, her voice clear and carrying through the silent ballroom. "My name is Isabella Rossi. I am legal counsel for Eleanor Sterling Thorne." A collective gasp went through the room. Marcus's smile froze on his face. He looked from Isabella to Eleanor, who now stood a few feet away, her expression a mask of cold composure. "I am here," Isabella continued, her voice rising with theatrical precision, "to serve you with these." She held up a thick manila envelope. "These are divorce filings, citing adultery. And this..." She held up a second, even thicker envelope, which one of her associates handed to the chairman of the board, a stunned-looking man named Robert Henderson. "Is a formal notice of a lawsuit against you for the gross misuse of corporate funds, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty to Thorne Dynamics and its shareholders." Panic flared in Marcus's eyes. "This is ridiculous. It's a private matter. This is not the time or the place." On the contrary, Isabella cut in her voice, like steel. "This is precisely the time and place. You built your empire on a foundation of public trust. It seems only fitting to correct the record publicly." She turned to the stunned board members and the ravenous press. "Over the past 6 months, Mr. Thorne has systematically embezzled an estimated $1.7 million from corporate accounts to fund a lavish lifestyle for his mistress, a Miss Chloe Decker, a Wharton intern at his company." She gestured vaguely towards the back of the room where Chloe had turned white as a sheet. All eyes followed her gesture. Chloe looked like a cornered animal, her ambition curdling into sheer terror. "We have receipts," Isabella announced, her voice booming. "We have bank records, Shell Corporation leases. We have evidence of fraud that is being delivered to the SEC as we speak. But more than that, we have visual confirmation." This was Eleanor's cue. She stepped forward. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was so clear and cold that it commanded absolute silence. "Marcus," she said, looking directly at her husband, who now seemed to shrink on the stage. You told me you were in London. You told me you were working." She held up her phone and turned it so the screen faced the crowd. She had the video cued. She didn't press play. She didn't need to. She just let the thumbnail image of Marcus and Chloe toasting with champagne in her penthouse speak for itself. "You took her to the home I bought for our son," Eleanor said, her voice finally trembling, not with weakness, but with righteous fury. "You stood in my home, and you mocked me. You toasted to your future while you were destroying mine." The ballroom erupted into chaos. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Board members were on their feet, their faces a mixture of shock and fury. Robert Henderson, the chairman, was already on his phone, his voice sharp and urgent. Marcus stood frozen on the stage, his face ashen. The illusion of the Titan had shattered, revealing the small, deceitful man underneath. He looked at Eleanor, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. He had been so thoroughly, so publicly, so perfectly checkmated. Eleanor didn't wait to see the rest. She had done what she came to do. She turned her back on her husband, on the life they had built, and on the empire that was now crumbling around him. With Isabella Rossi at her side, she walked calmly and deliberately out of the ballroom, leaving the ruins of Marcus Thorne's world behind her. As the heavy doors swung shut, they muffled the sound of a king being dethroned. The fallout from the Thorne Dynamics Innovation Gala was immediate and spectacular. The story was a supernova in the financial and society pages. Thorne's throne topples, screamed one headline, "Penthouse lies and videotape, CEO's empire crumbles," read another. Marcus Thorne's downfall was as swift as it was brutal. The board of directors convened an emergency meeting the very next morning. Faced with irrefutable evidence of embezzlement and the looming SEC investigation, they voted unanimously to remove him as CEO and chairman. His stock options were frozen, his corporate assets seized. He became a pariah overnight, the man who had flown too close to the sun on wings of arrogance and deceit. Chloe Decker vanished. Fired from the company and publicly shamed, she deleted her social media, broke her apartment lease, and disappeared back into the anonymity from which she had so desperately tried to escape. She became a footnote in the scandal, a cautionary tale whispered among future interns. Eleanor, guided by Isabella Rossi, navigated the ensuing legal storm with quiet dignity and strength. The divorce was settled quickly and decisively. Given the overwhelming evidence of both financial misconduct and infidelity, Marcus had no leverage. Eleanor received a settlement that was not just generous, but just. It secured her and her son's future 10 times over. But she didn't want Marcus's blood money to define her. She sold the penthouse on Park Avenue. The space, once a symbol of her dreams, now held too many ghosts. With the proceeds from the sale and a portion of her settlement, she established a new foundation. She called it the Sterling Foundation for New Beginnings. Its mission was to provide grants and support systems for single mothers seeking to start their own businesses, a cause that now resonated deep in her soul. 2 months after the gala, in the quiet, early morning hours, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl. She had been so sure it was a boy, a detail Marcus had simply made up. Holding her daughter for the first time, Eleanor felt a wave of love so pure it washed away the last remnants of bitterness. She looked down at the tiny, perfect face and knew exactly what to name her. Hope. A year later, the city looked different to Eleanor. She lived not in a sprawling mansion or a sky-high penthouse, but in a beautifully restored brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. It was a home filled not with priceless art, but with laughter, the smell of baby powder, and the messy, wonderful chaos of a life being truly lived. From her office, where she personally reviewed grant applications for her foundation, She could see the distant spires of Manhattan. The skyline no longer represented an empire she had been a part of, but a world of possibilities she was now shaping on her own terms. One afternoon, holding Hope in her arms, she stood by the window looking out at the city. Her daughter gurgled happily, reaching a tiny hand out to touch the glass. Eleanor was no longer Eleanor Thorne, the wife of a titan. She was Eleanor Sterling, a mother, a philanthropist, a founder. She had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only survived, but thrived. She had torn down a gilded cage and from its ruins had built a true home and a lasting legacy. She hadn't just found justice, she had found herself. And in her arms, she held the future bright and full of hope. 2 years had passed. In the fast-moving currents of New York City, 2 years can feel like a lifetime. The scandal of Marcus Thorne had faded from a roaring blaze to embers, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties, before being replaced by the next corporate implosion, the next public disgrace. In its place, a new narrative had quietly, firmly taken root, the story of Eleanor Sterling. Her new life was a tapestry woven with purpose and peace. The Sterling Foundation for New Beginnings had become a celebrated success, a beacon in the city's philanthropic scene. Eleanor was no longer just a society name. She was a respected founder, praised in magazines like Forbes and Fast Company for her shrewd investments in female entrepreneurs. Her Brooklyn Heights brownstone was a home, not a showroom. Its walls, once bare, were now covered in finger paintings and photographs of a chubby-cheeked, laughing toddler. Hope was the sun around which Eleanor's world now revolved. At 2.5, she was a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, with her mother's bright, intelligent eyes and a stubborn streak that was entirely her own. Eleanor's days were a gentle rhythm of mornings in the park, afternoons in her sunlit office, reviewing business plans, and evenings filled with bedtime stories and lullabies. The trauma of her past life felt distant, like a story she had read about someone else. The ice that had formed around her heart had melted, leaving behind not a scar, but fertile ground from which this new life had grown. It was on a crisp Tuesday in October that an echo from that past life found its way into her sanctuary. It arrived not with a bang, but in a simple cream-colored envelope delivered with the day's mail to the Foundation's office. It was addressed to Ms. Eleanor Sterling, in a familiar, confident script that made the breath catch in her throat. There was no return address, but she didn't need one. Her assistant, a sharp young woman named Maria, had placed it on top of a stack of grant proposals. This one came by courier Miss Sterling, marked personal. Eleanor stared at the envelope, her hand hovering over it. For a moment, she was back in her Greenwich home, the cold dread seeping into her bones. She felt a phantom chill the memory of betrayal, so visceral it was almost physical. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she picked it up, her movements precise, and carried it into her private office, closing the door behind her. She slit it open with a silver letter opener, a gift from the first entrepreneur she had funded. Inside was a single sheet of heavy, expensive stationery. Eleanor, I imagine this letter is the last thing you ever expected or wanted to receive. 2 years is a long time. I have had nothing but time to reflect on the man I was and the cataclysmic mistakes I made. There are no words to properly express the depth of my remorse, not for the loss of my company or my reputation, but for the loss of you and the family we were meant to be. I was a man blinded by ego, and I will live with the consequences of that blindness for the rest of my days. I have been through extensive therapy. I have worked on myself away from the noise and the pressures that defined my old life. I am not asking for your forgiveness. I know I have no right to it. I am not asking for a second chance. I am writing to you today for one reason only: hope. She is my daughter, a fact that remains true despite all my failings. I see her in photos online, in the society pages covering your foundation's good work. She is beautiful. She looks like you. A child needs her father, Eleanor. Whatever I was, she deserves the chance to know me as the man I am now. I am not seeking to disrupt your life. I am not asking for custody or to interfere with your parenting. I am simply asking for the chance to meet her, to let her know she has a father who, despite his unforgivable errors, loves her. I will await your response through counsel, if you prefer. I pray you will find it in your heart to consider this not for my sake, but for hers. Yours, Marcus. Eleanor read it once, then twice. The carefully crafted words, the performance of penitence, the weaponization of their child, it was all pure, undiluted Marcus. The letter wasn't an apology. It was an opening salvo, a strategic move. The serene calm of her office evaporated. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She stood up and walked to the window, wrapping her arms around herself. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was demanding access. He was using their daughter as a key to unlock a door she had bolted shut and reinforced with steel. The old rage, the cold, calculated fury she had felt watching that video surged back, but this time it was different. It was mingled with a fierce, primal fear. Fear for hope. Fear for the peace she had fought so hard to build. That evening, after she put Hope to bed, her sister Sophia came over. Sophia, a practical, warm-hearted pediatrician, had been her quiet anchor through the whole ordeal. Eleanor handed her the letter without a word. Sophia read it, her expression hardening. "The nerve of this guy," she said, placing the letter on the counter as if it were contaminated. "A child needs her father. Noel. A child needs a good father. A stable, loving, present father. Not a narcissistic manipulator on a redemption tour." "But what if he's right, Soph?" Eleanor whispered the words, tasting like ash. "What if years from now, Hope resents me for keeping him away? What if she has questions I can't answer? He's still her biological father." "And that's all he is," Sophia said firmly, taking Eleanor's hands. "A biological fact. He's not the one who wakes up for her at 3 a.m. when she has a nightmare. He's not the one who kisses her scraped knees or reads "Good Night Moon" 5 times in a row. You are her parent. You are her home. This," she tapped the letter, "is not about Hope. This is about him. This is his next move." As Sophia spoke, the fog of Eleanor's fear began to clear, replaced by the familiar cold clarity of strategy. Sophia was right. This wasn't about fatherhood. It was about public relations. After 2 years of silence, Marcus was plotting a comeback. And what better way to rebrand himself than as a penitent, loving father, desperate to connect with his estranged child? The media would eat it up. It was the first step to rebuilding his image, to rewriting his own story. Hope was not the objective. She was the tool. "He's trying to use her to get his life back," Eleanor said, her voice now steady. "Exactly," Sophia affirmed. "So you can't play his game. You have to make your own." The next morning, Eleanor Sterling made a call she hadn't made in a very long time. Isabella Rossi's office. "It's Eleanor Sterling for her," she said. Isabella came on the line instantly, her voice as sharp as ever. "Eleanor, I trust you're not calling to invite me to a gala." "Something like that," Eleanor said dryly. "Marcus has resurfaced. He sent a letter. He wants to see Hope." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "And so it begins," Isabella said, not with surprise but with weary inevitability. The second act. What's your play? That's why I'm calling you, Eleanor replied. I won't deny him outright. That would make me look like the bitter ex-wife and feed his narrative. But I will not allow him to use my daughter as a prop in his redemption theater. I want to build a cage of conditions so meticulous, so restrictive that only a man genuinely committed to being a father would ever agree to it. A man like Marcus will refuse. A low chuckle came from Isabella. I love it. A legal labyrinth. What are you thinking? Supervised visitation only at a neutral therapeutic facility, for 1 hour once a month. He submits to a full psychological evaluation beforehand, conducted by a court-appointed professional. He pays for everything. He is not permitted to bring gifts, take photos, or have any other person present. All communication regarding scheduling goes through our lawyers. No direct contact. And there's a morality clause. If he so much as attempts to use these visits for his public image, a leak to the press, a social media post, all access is terminated permanently. We give him exactly what he asked for, a chance to know his daughter, but strip it of all the PR value he's actually seeking. Eleanor, Isabella said, the admiration clear in her voice. You've become more ruthless than I am. I'll have my team draft the agreement this afternoon. He'll have it by morning. Hanging up the phone, Eleanor felt a profound shift inside her. The fear was gone. The shock had passed. In its place was a renewed, steely resolve. She walked to Hope's room and stood in the doorway, watching her daughter sleep peacefully in her crib, clutching a worn teddy bear. The battle she now understood was not over. Perhaps it never would be. Marcus was an echo that would likely reverberate through her life for years to come. But she was no longer the woman who had been shattered by his betrayal. She was the architect of her own life, the fierce protector of her daughter's peace. She would meet every echo with a wall of her own making, built of intelligence, strength, and a mother's unyielding love. She looked at Hope, her heart full, and knew she was ready for whatever came next. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a cheating husband caught on camera. It was a story about the deceptive gloss of a perfect life, and the unshakable strength of a woman who refused to be a victim. Eleanor Sterling could have crumbled, but instead she calculated. She could have screamed, but instead she planned. She used the very tools of her gilded cage, the wealth, the technology, the high-stakes world she lived in, to architect a justice that was as swift as it was absolute. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in holding on, but in strategically letting go and building something new and better from the ground up. What did you think of Eleanor's incredible strategy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a story of epic revenge, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas you won't want to miss. Thank you for watching. The flash of a camera can capture a moment, but tonight it would detonate a life. In the gilded ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel, where New York's elite gathered to trade pleasantries and seven-figure donations, a lie was about to be told on a stage flooded with light. Julian Sterling, a titan of industry, stood with a smile as dazzling as the chandelier above him. But the woman on his arm was not his wife. His real wife, Amelia, 8 months pregnant with their first child, was supposed to be at home. But she wasn't. And what she did next would not only expose a devastating betrayal, but would ignite a battle for $1 billion empire in front of the entire world. The air in the Sterling's penthouse on Park Avenue was always still a carefully curated silence that cost a fortune to maintain. From their 70th-floor perch, the chaotic symphony of New York City was reduced to a muted, glittering tapestry. For Amelia Sterling, this silence had once felt like peace. Now it felt like a vacuum, sucking the very air from her lungs. She ran a hand over the gentle, taut swell of her belly. 8 months. In 8 months, she had gone from being the happiest woman in the world to a ghost in her own home. The baby, a boy they had already named Leo, was a constant tumbling reminder of a dream that was curdling into a nightmare. Amelia wasn't born into this world of silent penthouses and bespoke couture. She had met Julian Sterling when they were both nobodies with outsized ambitions at Columbia. She was the brilliant, meticulous business student who saw potential in his chaotic genius for software architecture. It was her business plan that secured their first round of seed funding for Sterling Innovations. Her strategies that navigated them through 2 recessions. She wasn't just the woman behind the man. She was the architect of the platform he stood upon. For 12 years, they were an unbreakable team. He was the face, the charismatic visionary. She was the strategist, the steady hand, the one who transformed his wild ideas into profitable realities. They built an empire worth billions, and she had never once doubted their foundation. The cracks began as hairline fractures almost invisible. It started 6 months ago. Late nights at the office became more frequent, explained away by a critical new product launch. Business trips to Singapore and Zurich were extended with little notice. The physical distance was one thing, but the emotional chasm was what truly terrified her. The easy laughter they once shared over dinner was replaced by the polite, stilted conversation of strangers. The way he looked at her had changed. The adoration was gone, replaced by a distracted, almost clinical assessment. He blamed it on the stress of the company and the impending responsibility of fatherhood. "I just need to close this last deal, Amy," he'd murmur, kissing her forehead without meeting her eyes. "Then it's just you and me and Leo, I promise." Amelia, ever the pragmatist, tried to believe him. She focused on the nursery, on picking out tiny onesies, and reading books on motherhood. She told herself this was a phase, a temporary storm before the calm of their new life as a family. But a woman knows. She knows in the shift of a tone, the scent of a strange perfume on a suit jacket that came back from the dry cleaners too quickly, the phone that was suddenly always angled away from her. The name she overheard in a hushed, angry phone call Julian took in his study was Isabella. It was spoken with a frustrated intimacy that twisted a knife in Amelia's gut. Tonight was the Sterling Foundation's annual charity gala, the pinnacle of their philanthropic efforts, and the jewel in their social crown. For years, Amelia had been the heart of the foundation, personally overseeing its projects, supporting underprivileged students in STEM. It was her passion. This year, however, Julian had been insistent she not attend. "You're 8 months pregnant, darling," he had said 2 nights ago. His voice slick with a manufactured concern that made her skin crawl. "You need to rest. The stress, the crowds. It's too much. I'll handle everything. I'll make a speech and tell everyone you send your love." She had looked at him, then truly looked at him, and saw the lie swimming in the depths of his cool blue eyes. He didn't want her there. It wasn't about her health. It was about her presence. "But Julian, it's my project," she protested weakly. "The scholarship recipients will be there. I wanted to meet them." "Next year," he'd said with an air of finality, already turning away to adjust his tie. "I need to be at my best tonight, Amy. A lot is riding on this. Don't make it difficult." The dismissal was as sharp as a slap. She was being hidden, erased. Now standing in their cavernous walk-in closet, she looked at the gown she had planned to wear. A custom-made seraphine gown in deep sapphire silk, designed to celebrate her pregnancy, not hide it. On the other side of the closet hung Julian's tuxedo, perfectly pressed and ready. He had left an hour ago, his last words a perfunctory, "Get some rest, I'll be late." A cold, hard certainty began to crystallize in her heart, displacing the fog of doubt and fear. She was not a fool to be managed or a patient to be placated. She was Amelia Sterling, the co-architect of an empire, and she would not be erased from her own life. She picked up her phone, her fingers moving with a newfound resolve. The first call was to her driver, Miguel, a man who had been with her for a decade and whose loyalty was unquestionable. "Miguel," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Please have the car ready in 20 minutes. I've decided to attend the gala after all." The second call was to a number she hadn't dialed in years, but one she had kept for a reason she never wanted to admit to herself. It was to Clara Hayes, a notoriously sharp litigator who had been 2 years ahead of her at Columbia Law, long before Amelia had dropped out to build the company with Julian. Clara was known as the Velvet Hammer, soft-spoken, elegant, and absolutely lethal in a negotiation or a courtroom. "Clara," Amelia said when the lawyer answered. "It's Amelia Sterling. I need you. I think my husband is about to do something catastrophic, and I need you to be ready." Clara's voice was calm, devoid of surprise. "Send me the details. I'm always ready." As Amelia put on the sapphire gown, she didn't feel like a victim. The pain was still there, a hot, searing agony in her chest, but it was now fueling something else, a cold, righteous fury. Julian had underestimated her. He had mistaken her love for weakness, her partnership for dependence. He had forgotten who she was. Tonight, at his grandest celebration on his biggest stage, she would remind him. The drive to the St. Regis was a surreal journey through a city that sparkled with indifference. Each streetlight that washed over Amelia's face in the back of the Maybach felt like a slow-motion strobe light, illuminating the fractures in her perfect life. Miguel, sensing the gravity of the evening, drove in absolute silence, his eyes meeting hers only once in the rearview mirror, with a look of quiet, unwavering support. Amelia clutched her small evening bag, her knuckles white. Inside was her phone, a copy of her marriage certificate, and a single folded document that she prayed she would not have to use, but which Clara had insisted she bring. It was a copy of the original Sterling Innovations partnership agreement, the one they'd signed on a cheap diner table 12 years ago, the one that predated the layers of corporate structuring and prenuptial agreements Julian's lawyers had since built around them. She had instructed Miguel to use the service entrance to avoid the spectacle of the red carpet. She didn't want to be seen. Not yet. The element of surprise was her only weapon in a war she was just beginning to understand she was fighting. A sympathetic hotel manager, a woman Amelia had worked with on numerous foundation events, ushered her through the labyrinthine corridors of the hotel's back of house. The distant sound of the orchestra grew louder, with every step the muffled bass thumping like a second anxious heartbeat against her own. "Are you all right, Mrs. Sterling?" the manager asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "We weren't expecting you." "I'm fine, Maria. Thank you," Amelia replied, forcing a serene smile. "I just wanted to make a quiet entrance." Maria led her to a small alcove just off the main ballroom, shielded by a large floral arrangement. From here, Amelia had a clear, unobstructed view of the stage and the sea of tables filled with the city's most powerful figures. The room was breathtaking, a kaleidoscope of glittering gowns flashing diamonds and the self-satisfied smiles of the 1%. And there at the center of it all was Julian. He was working the room, moving from table to table, with the effortless charm that had always been his greatest asset. He looked magnificent in his Tom Ford tuxedo, a king in his court. But he wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm was a woman Amelia had never seen in person, but whose face she had glimpsed in blurry, long-lens photos sent by a private investigator she'd hired 2 weeks ago. Isabella Vance. She was stunning in a way that was both intimidating and impossibly generic. Long raven hair, impossibly high cheekbones, and a red dress that seemed poured onto her statuesque frame. She looked up at Julian with an expression of pure adoration, an expression Amelia herself had worn for over a decade. A wave of nausea, hot and acidic, rose in Amelia's throat. It was one thing to suspect, to see grainy photos. It was another to witness it here in their world at their event. It was a desecration. She watched as Julian laughed, touching Isabella's back with a possessive familiarity that made Amelia's breath catch in her chest. The people at the tables, their friends, their business partners, people who had been to their home for dinner, smiled and chatted with the couple, seemingly unfazed. A chilling realization dawned on Amelia. This wasn't new to them. The rumors must have been circulating for months. She was the last to know. The clueless, pregnant wife kept safely at home while her husband paraded his replacement. The master of ceremonies, a well-known news anchor, took to the stage. "And now," his booming voice echoed through the ballroom, "it is my distinct honor to welcome the man of the hour, the visionary founder of Sterling Innovations, and the generous heart behind the Sterling Foundation, Mr. Julian Sterling." A wave of applause swept the room. Julian, beaming, led Isabella by the hand toward the stage. He helped her up the small set of stairs with a tenderness that was like a physical blow to Amelia. They stood together at the podium, a perfect, gleaming power couple. The spotlight caught the massive diamond on Isabella's left hand, and Amelia felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. It wasn't just an affair. It was a replacement. Julian tapped the microphone, the sound reverberating through the silent, expectant room. "Thank you, David. Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice smooth as velvet. "Your generosity continues to astound me and allows the foundation to do its vital work. This has been a year of tremendous growth for Sterling Innovations, and a year of profound personal change for me." He paused, turning to look at Isabella, his eyes filled with a scripted public devotion. He took her hand in his. "Many of you have known me for years, and you've known the support I've had beside me. But life is about evolution, about embracing new chapters, and I am overjoyed to begin my next chapter with the most incredible woman I have ever known." He lifted her hand to his lips. The cameras at the foot of the stage flashed in a frenzy. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. "Don't say it, Julian. Please, for the love of God, don't." But he did. "I want to thank you all for coming," he continued, his voice ringing with triumph. "And I want you all to join me in celebrating the future. Please, a round of applause for my beautiful wife, Isabella Sterling." The name hit the room like a sonic boom. For a split second, there was a stunned silence, a collective intake of breath as hundreds of people processed the public execution they had just witnessed. Amelia felt the air leave her body, her vision narrowing to a pinpoint focused on the two figures bathed in light on the stage. Isabella Sterling. He had given her Amelia's name. Then, confused but polite, the applause began to ripple through the room. It was hesitant at first, then grew stronger as people followed the social cue. They were clapping for her replacement. They were applauding the erasure of Amelia Sterling. In her shielded alcove, Amelia leaned against the cold marble wall, one hand protectively on her stomach, where Leo gave a sudden violent kick as if sensing his mother's agony. The sound of the applause, the flash of the cameras, the smiling face of her husband beside his new wife, it all merged into a vortex of betrayal so profound it felt like it could tear her apart. But it didn't. As the applause died down and Julian began his prepared speech about philanthropy, something inside Amelia snapped. The part of her that was grieving, that was heartbroken, that was humiliated, went silent. And in its place a cold, diamond-hard clarity emerged. He had not just left her. He had not just cheated on her. He had attempted to publicly annihilate her, to rewrite their entire history in front of the world that she had helped build. He thought she was a chapter he could close. He was wrong. She was the whole damn book. Amelia pushed herself off the wall. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with a fire that could have melted steel. She looked at Maria, the hotel manager who was staring at her with wide, horrified eyes. Maria. Amelia's voice was quiet, but it held a new, chilling authority. I need you to do something for me. I need you to get a message to the head of security. Tell him that the real Mrs. Sterling is here, and she is about to go on stage. While Julian's voice droned on from the stage, weaving a hypocritical tapestry of words about integrity and community. Amelia's mind was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. The initial shock had passed, leaving behind the icy calm that precedes a hurricane. She was no longer a wife betrayed. She was a general surveying a battlefield, calculating her next move. She found a deserted powder room, the opulent marble and gold, a stark contrast to the ugliness of her reality. Staring at her reflection, she saw the faint smudges of tears under her eyes, but also a glint of steel that hadn't been there an hour ago. She was the majority partner in their initial venture, a fact Julian had conveniently forgotten, burying it under years of complex corporate filings. He thought the prenup was his shield, but he'd forgotten about the foundation upon which the entire house was built. Her phone buzzed. It was Clara Hayes. I'm watching the live stream, Clara said, her voice devoid of emotion. He actually did it. The unmitigated gall of that man. He did, Amelia breathed, steadying herself against a vanity. He called her Isabella Sterling. That's not just infidelity, Amelia. That's a public declaration. It's a calculated move to delegitimize you. In legal terms, it's a gift. A very, very expensive gift he just handed you. Amelia recalled the clause Clara had been referring to when they'd last spoken. Years ago, when they were formalizing their prenuptial agreement, Julian's lawyers had drafted a document that was overwhelmingly in his favor. It protected his assets, his company, shares, everything. But Amelia, guided by a flicker of premonition she couldn't explain at the time, had insisted on a single, non-negotiable addition. With the help of a young but brilliant lawyer, Clara, she had crafted the public image and fidelity clause. It was an unusual clause, one Julian had laughed at, calling it her romantic nonsense. It stipulated that their partnership was not just financial, but also one of public trust, essential to the brand of Sterling Innovations. It stated that in the event of a public act of infidelity, so egregious that it brought the company and the family name into disrepute, causing demonstrable harm to the brand's image of stability and integrity, a penalty would be enacted. The penalty was draconian. It would trigger an immediate and irrevocable transfer of 30% of Julian's voting shares in Sterling Innovations to Amelia. Combined with the 25% she already owned outright from her foundational role, this would give her a controlling 55% majority. It would make her the master of their universe. At the time, Julian had signed it without a second thought, smugly secure in his ability to be discreet. "Don't worry, Amy," he had chuckled. "I'm not an idiot." "He is an idiot, Clara," Amelia whispered into the phone, a grim smile touching her lips for the first time that night. "He's an arrogant, spectacular idiot." "Arrogance is the best weapon a litigator can hope for in an opponent," Clara replied. "Now listen to me carefully. The clause is ironclad, but he will fight it. He will try to bury us in litigation for years. The key is to act now, while the narrative is white hot. You have a captive audience of the most influential people in the city, and the press is right there. You cannot let him leave that stage and start spinning his version of the story." "What do I do?" Amelia asked, her heart beginning to pound again, this time with adrenaline, not fear. "You don't hide. You don't release a statement tomorrow. You walk out on that stage right now. You take the microphone and you claim what is yours. You be calm. You be factual. You be the CEO, not the scorned wife. Remind them who you are. Remind him who you are." "Can you do that?" Amelia took a deep breath, the air filling her with a cold fire. She thought of her son Leo sleeping soundly in her womb, his future hanging in the balance. She thought of the 12 years of her life she had poured into building their dream, a dream Julian was now trying to steal. "Yes," she said, her voice resonating with newfound power. "I can do that." "Good. I'm already on my way to the hotel. I've also taken the liberty of contacting Arthur Finch and 2 other board members who are in attendance tonight. I sent them a copy of the clause. They know what's at stake. You won't be entirely alone." Arthur Finch. He was the company's first major investor, a mentor to them both in the early days, and the closest thing the board had to a conscience. He was old school, a man for whom loyalty and honor were paramount. If Arthur was on her side, the battle was half won. "Thank you, Clara," Amelia said, emotion finally cracking her voice. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Go and win the war." Amelia hung up. She took one last look in the mirror, straightened the lines of her sapphire gown, and placed a hand on her belly, a silent promise to her son. "I will not let him break us. This family, this company is ours." She exited the powder room and walked back towards the ballroom, her heels clicking on the polished marble floors. The sound was no longer hesitant. Each step was deliberate, measured, and purposeful. Each click was a countdown to the moment the world and her husband would finally learn that Amelia Sterling was not a victim to be pitied, but a queen coming to reclaim her throne. The storm was no longer gathering. It was about to break. On stage, Julian Sterling was at the apex of his power. The warmth of the spotlight felt like a benediction. The attentive faces in the crowd, a reflection of his own greatness. He had done it. He had seamlessly executed the most audacious social maneuver of his life. The initial brief hesitation in the applause had been quickly swallowed by the force of his confidence. People adapted. They always did. Isabella stood beside him, a vision in crimson, her hand resting delicately in the crook of his arm. She was perfect. She was young, vibrant, and looked at him as if he were a god. She didn't challenge him. She didn't question his late nights. She didn't have the weary familiarity that had begun to grate on him with Amelia. Isabella was a beautiful blank canvas on which he could paint his next chapter. He finished his speech with a flourish, announcing a surprise $5 million personal donation to the foundation, a move designed to cement his image as a benevolent leader. The applause was thunderous this time, genuine. He felt a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph. As he and Isabella descended the stage, they were immediately swarmed by well-wishers. "Julian, congratulations! She's stunning," said Marcus Thorne, a hedge fund billionaire with a notorious reputation for trading in wives like stocks. "A bold move, Sterling. I like it," commented another, a grizzled real estate magnate. Julian accepted the praise with a magnanimous smile, telling a carefully rehearsed story. "It was all very sudden, but when you know, he'd say with a shrug. "Amelia and I separated amicably some time ago. We wanted to keep it private for the sake of the family, but it was time to move forward." It was a plausible lie, cushioned by the unspoken rule of their social circle. Don't ask too many questions, especially when the answer might be uncomfortable. Isabella played her part beautifully, offering shy smiles and murmured thanks, the picture of a woman gracefully stepping into a role she was born to play. But not everyone was convinced. He noticed a few of the older, more established couples people who had known him and Amelia since the beginning, offering curt, tight-lipped congratulations before quickly moving away. He saw whispers exchanged behind champagne flutes, questioning glances shot in his direction. He dismissed it as envy. His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was a text from his chief communications officer. "Press is going wild. We need to release a formal statement ASAP clarifying your marital status. Things could get messy." Julian texted back. "Draft something about an amicable divorce. I'll approve it in the morning. Control the narrative." He felt invincible, the master of his own story. The messiness was a small price to pay for the freedom he had just bought himself. Amelia would be hurt, of course, but she was a pragmatist. She would see the futility of a fight. Their prenup was a fortress. She'd get a generous settlement, the penthouse enough, to live a quiet, comfortable life out of the spotlight. It was a clean, surgical cut. Then he saw Arthur Finch making his way through the crowd toward him. Arthur, a man in his late 70s with a ramrod posture and eyes that had seen the rise and fall of countless Wall Street titans, was the one person whose opinion Julian genuinely valued. "Arthur, so glad you could make it," Julian said, extending a hand. Arthur ignored the hand. His face was a thundercloud of disapproval. He looked from Julian to Isabella, his gaze lingering on her with undisguised contempt, before settling back on Julian. "What have you done, son?" Arthur's voice was low, a gravelly rumble of disappointment. Julian's smile tightened. "Arthur, it's a long story. Amelia and I—" "Save it." Arthur cut him off. "I had dinner with you and Amelia at your home 3 weeks ago. You kissed your pregnant wife goodbye and told her you loved her. Amicable separation is a lie that insults my intelligence and her honor." Julian felt a flicker of annoyance. "This is a private matter. You made it a public matter the moment you put that woman on your stage and gave her your wife's name," Arthur retorted, his voice dangerously quiet. "You built Sterling Innovations on a reputation of stability, of long-term vision of trust, and you just lit a match to it for a cheap thrill. This isn't just a private matter, Julian. It's a corporate governance issue. You've introduced a massive liability into the company, and you did it with a microphone and a spotlight." Before Julian could formulate a response, Arthur's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his eyes widening slightly. It was an email from Clara Hayes. He read it quickly, his expression shifting from anger to stunned disbelief. He looked up at Julian, a new chilling light in his eyes. "You fool," Arthur whispered the words, carrying more weight than any shout. "You catastrophic fool! You have no idea what you've just unleashed!" Arthur turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Julian standing there, a seed of doubt finally penetrating his armor of arrogance. What did Arthur mean? What could Amelia possibly do? The prenup was airtight. He held all the cards. At that moment, a subtle shift occurred in the atmosphere of the ballroom. The buzz of conversation began to die down, replaced by a wave of murmurs. Heads started to turn not towards him, but towards the grand entrance. A path was clearing in the crowd, people stepping back as if for royalty. Julian followed their gaze, and his blood ran cold. There, walking slowly and deliberately through the parted sea of New York's elite, was Amelia. She was radiant, a vision in sapphire. Her pregnancy, not a weakness to be hidden, but a proud declaration. Her face was serene, her eyes fixed on the stage. She wasn't weeping. She wasn't hysterical. She looked like a queen who had come to address a rebellion in her court. Julian's triumph evaporated, replaced by a sudden, sickening dread. This was not the quiet, pragmatic Amelia who would accept a settlement. This was the Amelia he hadn't seen in years. This was the brilliant, ruthless strategist who had once stared down venture capitalists and hostile board members and made them bend to her will. Isabella sensed the change immediately. "Julian, who is that?" she whispered, her grip on his arm tightening. "What's happening?" Julian couldn't answer. He could only watch as his wife, the one he had so carelessly discarded, walked towards the stage, towards the microphone, and towards the complete and utter destruction of the world he had just built. The king on his cardboard throne was about to face the woman who owned the castle. Amelia moved through the ballroom with a grace that defied the weight of her body and the gravity of her purpose. The whispers followed her like the train of a gown, a ripple of shock and speculation. "Is that? I thought she was ill. My God, she's pregnant." She ignored them all. Her focus was a laser beam locked on the stage at the front of the room. It was her stage. She had overseen the design, chosen the flowers, approved the lighting. Tonight it had been used as a platform for her public humiliation. Now it would be her pedestal for reclamation. As she approached the front, she could see Julian's face pale under the warm stage lights. The smug confidence had vanished, replaced by a mask of disbelief and burgeoning panic. The woman beside him, Isabella, looked utterly lost, her beauty dissolving into confusion as the attention of 1,000 powerful people shifted from her to the approaching pregnant woman. 2 security guards, large men in black suits, moved to intercept her at the bottom of the stairs to the stage. They had clearly been given instructions. "Ma'am, I'm sorry you can't go up there," the first guard said, holding out a placating hand. Amelia didn't break her stride. She looked him directly in the eye, her voice calm and imbued with an authority that was absolute. "My name is Amelia Sterling. This is my foundation's event, and that is my husband on that stage. Take your hand off my path." The guard faltered. He looked back at his partner, then towards the stage where Julian was frozen, offering no direction. In that moment of hesitation, Arthur Finch stepped forward, his aged but powerful presence instantly changing the dynamic. "Let her pass," Arthur commanded the guards. "She is exactly where she needs to be." The guards, recognizing a power greater than their immediate orders, stepped aside. Amelia gave Arthur a brief, grateful nod and ascended the 3 steps to the stage. The silence in the ballroom was now absolute. It was a heavy, profound silence, filled with the delicious, terrifying anticipation of a scandal unfolding in real time. Every phone was out, every camera recording. This was a moment that would be replayed and dissected for weeks to come. Amelia walked directly to the podium, where Julian and Isabella stood like statues. She didn't look at Isabella. She refused to give the woman the dignity of her acknowledgement. Instead, her eyes locked with Julian's. In their depths, she saw it all, the shock, the fear, and finally the dawning, horrifying realization that he had made a fatal miscalculation. "Amelia," he stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper that the microphone picked up and amplified throughout the silent room. "What are you doing here? You should be at home." "I was," Amelia replied, her voice steady and clear, a stark contrast to his. "But I felt I was missing something important." She turned her attention from him to the microphone. She adjusted it slightly, a simple, deliberate gesture of someone taking control. She placed one hand on the podium and the other on her swollen belly, a powerful maternal image of both creation and destruction. She looked out at the audience, at the sea of stunned, curious faces. She saw the news anchor who had introduced Julian, his mouth agape. She saw the board members Clara had contacted, their expressions grim and resolute. She saw it all, and she felt no fear. "Good evening," she began, her voice ringing through the cavernous space, not with the hysteria of a wronged wife, but with the cool, measured tone of a CEO addressing her shareholders. "Many of you seem to be under some confusion, so I felt it was my duty to come here tonight and provide some clarity." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "My husband, Julian Sterling, was correct when he said this has been a year of profound change. He just neglected to share the full story." She turned her head slowly, her gaze falling upon Julian like a physical weight. "A few moments ago, my husband introduced you to Miss Isabella Vance. She made a point of using the correct name, a subtle but devastating correction, as his wife. This must have been quite a surprise to many of you, as it was to me, considering I am Amelia Sterling, his actual and legal wife, and the mother of his unborn son." A collective gasp went through the room. It was a physical sound, a wave of shock and outrage. The narrative Julian had tried to control was shattering before his eyes. He had cast himself as the romantic lead in a new story. Amelia was recasting him as the villain in a tragedy of his own making. This was her opening move in a game of chess he didn't even know they were playing. The Queen's gambit had been deployed, and the King was in check. The ballroom was a tinderbox, and Amelia had just struck the match. The gasp from the crowd was followed by an explosion of frantic murmurs. On stage, Julian's face had turned a ghastly shade of white. Isabella looked as if she wanted the floor to swallow her whole, her fantasy of a glamorous new life crumbling into a public nightmare. Amelia held up a hand, and an almost impossible silence fell once more. They were hers now. The entire room, the entire city was hanging on her next word. "I understand that private matters are seldom meant for public stages," she continued, her voice resonating with a powerful, almost sorrowful dignity. "But my husband, in his enthusiasm to begin his new chapter, chose this stage. He chose to involve all of you. Therefore, I am forced to respond on this stage." She let her gaze sweep across the front rows, where the most influential board members and investors of Sterling Innovations sat, their faces etched with shock and dawning fury. They were not just seeing a marital dispute, they were witnessing a catastrophic failure of judgment from their CEO. "Julian and I are bound by more than just a marriage certificate," Amelia stated, her tone shifting from personal revelation to hard-nosed business. We are bound by a partnership that began 12 years ago when Sterling Innovations was just an idea, sketched on a napkin. We are bound by contracts and agreements that formed the very bedrock of our company. Contracts, it seems, my husband has forgotten. Julian finally found his voice a strangled, desperate sound. Amelia, this is not the time or the place. We can discuss this at home. There is no home for us to discuss this in any more, Julian, she replied, her voice cutting through the air like glass, not turning to look at him. You made that clear, and this is precisely the time and the place, because this is no longer just about your infidelity. It is about your profound unsuitability to lead the company we built together. She turned slightly, addressing the board members directly. Gentlemen, many of you will be aware of the prenuptial agreement Julian and I signed, but you may be less aware of a specific provision I insisted upon, Clause 7b, the Public Image and Fidelity Clause. A low murmur went through the section where the board members sat. Arthur Finch nodded grimly. Clara Hayes, who had just slipped into the back of the ballroom, allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. The clause is quite specific, Amelia explained, her voice as sharp and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. It states that should one partner engage in a public act of infidelity so flagrant as to cause demonstrable damage to the reputation and stability of the Sterling brand, a severe and immediate penalty is triggered. I would argue that introducing your mistress as your wife at your own foundation's gala in front of the world's media, while your 8 months pregnant wife is at home, qualifies as flagrant. Laughter, sharp and humorless, rippled through parts of the crowd. The tide of public opinion, a force Julian had always masterfully manipulated, was turning against him with the ferocity of a tsunami. And the penalty, Amelia continued, her voice dropping for dramatic effect, is the immediate non-negotiable transfer of 30% of Julian's voting shares in Sterling Innovations to my name. The silence that followed was different. It was the sound of a billion-dollar bombshell detonating. Jaws dropped. Financial reporters in the audience were already typing furiously into their phones. Julian stared at her, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. He looked like a man who had just been shot and was only now realizing the blood pouring from his chest was his own. He had forgotten. In his colossal arrogance, he had completely forgotten about the romantic nonsense clause he had signed years ago. Amelia let the impact of her words sink in before delivering the final devastating blow. Combined with my existing 25% stake as a founding partner, she announced, her voice ringing with the authority of her newfound power. As of this moment, I am the majority shareholder of Sterling Innovations with a controlling interest of 55%. It was done. It was a coup executed with breathtaking precision in the heart of the enemy's camp. She turned to Julian, her eyes no longer holding pain, only a cold, dispassionate finality. So you see, Julian, you will have your new chapter. You are free to be with Miss Vance. But the company, the empire we built, remains with the family. With me. And with our son. She then turned back to the stunned audience. The Sterling Foundation will also be entering a new chapter. Effective immediately, its primary mission will be redirected. A new fund will be established, endowed with the $10 million that were pledged here tonight, dedicated entirely to providing financial, legal, and emotional support to women and single mothers who have been abandoned in circumstances like my own. A wave of applause started tentative at first, then swelling into a roar. It was led by the women in the room, a spontaneous, powerful expression of solidarity that shook the very foundations of the ballroom. They were clapping for her courage, for her brilliance, for her righteous fury. Amelia looked at her husband one last time. He was a broken man, stripped of his power, his reputation, and his empire in the space of 5 minutes. Isabella was already backing away from him, her face a picture of terror as she realized she had hitched her star to a falling meteor. Amelia Sterling did not feel a shred of pity. She simply took a deep, cleansing breath, turned away from the wreckage of her marriage, and walked off the stage. Not as a wife, but as the undisputed queen of Sterling innovations. The roar of applause that had sealed her victory felt distant to Amelia as she walked away from the stage. It was as if she were moving through water, the sounds of the world muted and distorted. She didn't look back at the tableau of destruction she had wrought at Julian, a statue of ash, or Isabella, a ghost in a red dress. Her entire being was focused on a single objective: getting out. Miguel was waiting just beyond the ballroom doors, his large, comforting presence a bulwark against the chaos. He took one look at her face, pale but resolute, and simply nodded, placing a steadying hand on her elbow to guide her through the hotel's service corridors. The hotel manager, Maria, met them with a cashmere wrap, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and awe. "Your car is waiting, Mrs. Sterling, darling," she whispered, the title now holding an undisputed weight. As they stepped into the cool night air, the adrenaline that had fueled Amelia's defiant stand began to recede, leaving a hollow, trembling exhaustion in its wake. The reality of what she had done, what she had lost, crashed down on her. She had won the war, but the battlefield was the ruins of her life, her love, her family. As she sank into the plush leather of the Maybach, the first sob escaped her, a ragged, guttural sound of 12 years of love and partnership dying. Miguel pulled away from the curb, just as a figure darted towards the car. It was Clara Hayes, her chic coat thrown over her evening dress, her face illuminated by the streetlights. She tapped on the window, and Amelia buzzed it down. "Don't go home," Clara said, her voice urgent but calm. "His lawyers will try to serve you. His sycophants will try to call you. The press will be camped outside the building by morning. I've booked you the presidential suite at the Mandarin Oriental under a corporate name. Go there. I'll handle everything on the ground here and meet you in an hour." Amelia could only nod, the tears now streaming silently down her face. "Clara, thank you." "We're not done yet," Clara said, a grim smile on her face. "This was just the declaration of war. Now we win it." Back in the St. Regis ballroom, chaos reigned. As Amelia disappeared, the spell of silence broke, and the room erupted. Julian stood frozen for a moment longer, a man publicly executed before he turned on Isabella. His face contorted in a mask of pure rage. "You," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "This is your fault." Isabella, terrified, stumbled back. "My fault. You told me she was a non-issue," she cried, her voice rising in panic. The cameras, which had never stopped flashing, captured her desperate accusatory expression. Realizing her position, she turned and fled the stage, pushing through the stunned crowd, her glamorous entrance a world away from this humiliating, frantic exit. She would be on a plane to an undisclosed location by sunrise, her 15 minutes of infamy already curdling into a lifetime of regret. Julian was immediately swarmed, not by well-wishers, but by the press shouting questions like machine gun fire. "Mr. Sterling, is the fidelity clause real? What is your response to the allegation? Will you be stepping down as CEO?" He was buffeted, lost his charm and power, utterly useless. It was Arthur Finch who finally broke through the cordon, his face a mask of cold fury. "That's enough," he boomed, his voice carrying the authority of old money and unimpeachable integrity. He grabbed Julian's arm. "You will come with me now. You will not speak another word to anyone." He dragged a dazed and broken Julian from the ballroom, not as a friend, but as a board member containing a toxic asset. The dawn broke over a city obsessed. The story was on every news channel, every website, every blog. The New York Post ran a full-page photo of Amelia on stage with the headline, "The CEO Mama." The Wall Street Journal took a more measured but no less devastating approach. Sterling innovations in crisis as founder's personal life implodes. Board scrambles to address shareholder concerns. On social media, #Sterling. Staging and #Amelia's Gambit were trending globally. Memes were already circulating Julian's horrified face, captioned with, "Finds out his prenup has a clause 7B." The public verdict was instantaneous and universal. Amelia was a hero, a corporate queen, a wronged woman who had claimed her power with breathtaking style. Julian was a villain, a fool, a textbook example of arrogant self-destruction. In the serene quiet of the hotel suite, Amelia, Clara, and Arthur Finch planned their next moves. Clara had been on the phone all night, leveraging the board's panic. "The emergency vote is scheduled for 6 a.m., Clara reported, sipping a much-needed coffee. "Arthur has already secured the proxies. They're terrified of a market collapse. They'll vote you in as interim CEO, Amelia. It's the only move that signals stability." "And Julian?" Amelia asked, her voice quiet. She was dressed in a hotel robe, her magnificent gown now lying in a sapphire heap on a chair. "He's been sequestered with his legal team," Arthur answered, his tone grim. "They're talking about challenging the clause, claiming duress, emotional distress, anything they can think of. It will be a nasty public fight." "Let them," Clara said with a sharp smile. "Discovery will be a nightmare for him. We'll subpoena every text message, every credit card statement, every hotel receipt. The more he fights, the dirtier he looks, and the more the company's value will be tied to you, Amelia, as the only viable leader." The board meeting was a formality. The vote was unanimous. At 10 a.m., Clara Hayes, flanked by Arthur, held a press conference. She didn't just confirm the story, she framed it. She spoke of Amelia's foundational role in the company, her strategic brilliance, and her unwavering dedication. She announced Amelia's appointment as CEO and laid out a clear, confident vision for the future. When the stock market opened, Sterling Innovations stock did dip for exactly 7 minutes. Then, following the press conference, it reversed course. Wall Street, it turned out, despised unpredictable narcissists far more than it disliked messy divorces. A CEO who could be so reckless in his personal life was a liability. A new leader who had just executed a flawless corporate takeover, on the other hand, was a symbol of strength and cunning. By noon, the stock was trading higher than it had been at the close of the previous day. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal maneuvering and corporate restructuring for Amelia. Julian's legal challenges were loud, expensive, and ultimately futile. Each motion his lawyers filed was expertly countered by Clara. With every passing day, his power waned. His allies on the board deserted him. His social circle ostracized him, and his reputation was reduced to a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. Amelia, in contrast, rose. She moved back into the Park Avenue penthouse, but it was a different place. Julian's belongings were professionally packed and sent to storage. His dark, heavy furniture was replaced. She filled the silent spaces not with ghosts, but with a new team, her own executive staff, who often met with her in the large living room. She was rarely alone, yet in the quiet of the night when the work was done and the city glittered below, she would sit in the nursery. She had designed a soft hand on her belly and allow herself to grieve. She grieved for the young man she had fallen in love with, the brilliant, chaotic partner with whom she had dreamed of conquering the world. She grieved for the family that Leo would never know. The victory was real, the power was hers, but it had come at the cost of the life she had thought was her own. 2 months after the gala, she walked into the CEO's office for the first time as its undisputed occupant. It had been gutted and redesigned to her specifications. The imposing mahogany desk Julian had favored was replaced by a sleek, collaborative table. The wall that once held framed photos of him, shaking hands with world leaders, now featured the company's original charter, the document she had co-written, and a stunning large-scale abstract painting by a female artist. It was an office that looked forward, not back. Arthur Finch knocked on the open door frame. "First quarterly earnings call as the boss," he said, beaming. "Nervous." Amelia turned from the window, a serene smile on her face. "I've been preparing for this for 12 years, Arthur. I'm not nervous. I'm ready." As she walked towards the boardroom, she felt Leo give a strong, decisive kick. It was a jolt of life, a reminder of the real foundation she was building. She had lost a husband, but she had solidified an empire and discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. The world had tried to write her out of her own story, casting her as the tragic, discarded wife. But she had picked up the pen and written a new ending for herself, not one of revenge, but of renaissance. She was Amelia Sterling, CEO Mother Architect of her own destiny, and she was just getting some started. Amelia Sterling's story isn't just about a marriage ending. It's about a woman's power being born. She turned a moment of ultimate betrayal into a masterclass in strategy and strength. She didn't just get even. She got everything, and in doing so, created a legacy of empowerment for herself and countless others through her remade foundation. Her story is a powerful reminder that the person you underestimate is often the one holding all the cards. What would you have done in Amelia's position? Could you have shown such incredible composure and strength on the world's biggest stage? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story of justice and resilience moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life dramas. Thank you for listening.